that bubble, then you have to go all over again and be screened and be tested before you can enter the bubble. Works very well. It's called a safe environment. It's a biologically safe environment. And it worked well because no one who was in the bubble got infected. And we've been talking a lot lately about vaccines. What are vaccines? They are normally a wicked virus. They are small parts of the virus, and there are human trials going on. I think there's a trial going on in South Africa by Pfizer. But we have been told by experts that our masks can be regarded as a vaccine. Because when you wear a mask, then you are minimizing your exposure to the virus, and your body will have time enough to build up antibodies if you are exposed. So we must regard our masks as a form of a vaccine. And we can agree that this has reduced the death rate remarkably. For mass participation, which is important actually for our athletics, there's a website, worldathletics.org, that has developed an assessment tool when you are planning mass participation. So there's a tool where you assess the risk level. There's a tool where you determine the preparedness and then what steps to put in place to mitigate against infection. So the risk will include things like how many participants are coming, where do they come from, where they're going to stay, where the event taking place, and so on. And then they look at the preparedness of the country, the preparedness of the venue, manpower available, and resources. Should there be an outbreak, are you able to manage it? And then they also look at the measures in place. Have you alerted everybody about the sanitation there, at the science in place? So when you have all those factors in place, then they can be charted on a table that they made, and you'll see if your risk is high or if your risk is low or if it's very high. So depending on the number that you got from your assessment tools, then you can decide that this is a very low risk area and you can motivate to have your mass event. If it's a high risk area, then you know you can't go on with the event. But let's also remember there are protocols that need to be observed. There are government guidelines that we are giving almost daily. Athletes must be cleared. Good hand and respiratory hygiene must be observed. And cleaning of equipment, if your athletes are using equipment. Social distancing and masks when not training. Remember, in training it's difficult, but when they are eating and they are not training, they have to do every mask. So I've put up a few references if you want to go through them, and all the material emails from very accredited people in the country. And we are saying, can we do this? Can we go back to sports? Yes, we can, but we need to do it responsibly. Thank you. I hope I'm still within time. I let us through this.
I
think she's almost on.
Thank you. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
She's on time. She's on time.
All right.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Dimakato, once again.
Okay.
Now I'm just.
Any questions?
Yes, I'll just go first in terms of the your presentation. I mean, one that comes to mind is I remember a couple of weeks ago the president said the isolation period is now 10 days out of 14. Was that a scientific advice to the president? Why exactly was it now reduced from 14 to 10?
It has been observed that the most infectious period of the virus is from when you get infected and you might not know. So that is called the incubation period, to about 7 days when you are sick. So basically, if you are exposed on a Saturday, you are infectious from that Saturday to 10 days after that. So it didn't make sense to have self-isolation beyond 10 days because the rate of infectiousness was lower after 10 days. Did I answer your question?
I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, so I'm just waiting for a couple of more questions just to come through from the team. But once again, thank you so very, very much. And I, myself, as a sports lover and having played football myself, I think I'm sure you enjoyed yourself out at the 2010 FIFA World Cup medical officer. Just your short brief, in terms of your experience. I'm sure it was one fantastic experience for you, Doctor.
It was a wonderful experience. I think it's something that you do once and you are happy. It was at the pinnacle of my career, so it was a wonderful, wonderful blessing.
Yeah, thank you so very much. I'm not receiving any questions as of yet. I'm sure our social media participants are still trying to gather their thoughts in terms of that one. So we'll just give him a couple of more seconds, and if there's anything coming through, and then I'll possibly forward it to you. But thank you so very much once again, Doctor. Truly appreciate your time and presentation, and I think we've all been educated today with your well thought out presentation. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. It was a great honor. I will just stick around for a little while just to see if there's anything. Otherwise, I'll send the answers to Carmen, but I will
Okay.
be around. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Thank you once again.
You ready?
Yeah.
Just stand in there. Stand in the middle.
In the middle.
Okay.
Sorry.
He's done now. We didn't know that he was going to stand, so that.
Welcome back to the webinar. Well, it's been a fantastic, first one in terms of what the doctor said, and we learned quite a lot from, what she's been speaking about, particularly, sports returning back post 2019, is 2020 rather, that is. It's been quite a tough, year, particularly for sports, as I said earlier on, with the, players, athletes, federations also having a very, very difficult time. But next we are going to be having one of the top gentlemen in his field, that is Professor Habib Norbay. He's a sports scientist by profession. Now, he's going to be presenting about sports persons after COVID-19, the guidelines for return to play principles. Now, just looking a bit of a profile of Professor Habib Norbay is that he's an associate professor at the University of Johannesburg, and he's also contributed his time as a sports scientist, speaker, as well as a humanitarian. Now, Professor Norbay has been working in academia for the last 8 years and has taught, published, supervised, and convened in various areas of sports science, public health, as well as wellness. And finally, Professor Norbay has published more than 30 papers in numerous academic journals and has presented at local and international conferences since 2012. So he's got 8 years of experience in terms of presenting both local and international conferences. So it's going to be quite interesting what he is going to be presenting to us. And please, while he is still presenting, can you just jot down your questions so that we are able to, post it to him post his presentation. So we're going to take a very quick break. We're back again with Professor Habib Norbay. Thank you so very much, and continue engaging with us. Let's hear your questions. Let us be enlightened by Professor. Thank you so very much. We're back again after this short break.
Can we get a profit now?
Yes, Prof.
Slides down.
Sure.
Just take some pictures.
Perfect. With your phone or mine? Okay. Can you take pictures? He says he wants pictures of. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Doing great.
Okay.
Just can you say, go all out on the handle, and if you could write it down now.
Okay.
That's
So it's Gauteng SA.
I don't need, I'm just
Okay.
going to send it to you.
Okay.
I'll send it to you now.
Okay.
Okay, sure. I'll give you a paper.
Okay, cool.
But otherwise,
Sure. Sure. Thank you. Thank you. No.
I can barely see anything on that screen, eh?
That's the biggest screen we have.
Sheesh.
Unless you have to come ahead.
I'm gonna have to come closer then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that will be fine.
Better. Yeah, I know, but this is not
The professor.
so just take these pictures and then just take them.
okay. I think we are ready. So I'll start by just getting away to you.
Yes, okay. Very good. So, do you want something to drink?
No, I'm fine.
Get behind the camera. Good morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity. It gives me great pleasure to present you on a topic that's really important at this time of the COVID-19 era, and I'll be talking about guidelines for physical activity and return to training during and after lockdown, which follows quite nicely from the previous speaker. So just in terms of the background, the current pandemic offers opportunities that recreational persons, athletes and their providers will and must find in order to pave an ideal pathway for preparation and or team success. The role that sport and physical activity play in this pandemic is unprecedented, as we know. It's fascinating and it reveals the immense impact that exercise has on every aspect of our lives. Providing guidelines for the prevention of COVID-19 and principles to return to play for athletes and recreational persons is therefore imperative. And what we know from the data is that exercise has a positive effect on COVID-19. So the premise of this is that because of the lockdown in COVID-19, there have been a lot of athletes and even recreational persons who have been struggling to return to play, either because they have been infected or because they have been trying to prevent the COVID-19 virus, and therefore it has impeded their training. So that's the basis of this presentation. So on the next slide you'll see that there's effects of non-training on specific physiological parameters over various time frames. So what we have on the x-axis, which is on the left, I don't have a pointer, but we have the duration of the break. So the longer the weeks of absence from training, the more severe the body will be impacted by. So what we can see is that it ranges from about 0 to 2 weeks right down to about 6 to 8 weeks or more. And then there's different components on the effects of the human body, whether it's musculoskeletal, cardiorespiratory, metabolic, or even body mass. So we can see that there's a number of different effects that it has on the human body. So what this table basically says is that the longer an athlete or a person abstains from exercise or sport, the more of a negative impact it will have on the body. So for example, there may be an increase in weight, particularly in terms of body fat percentage, and a decrease in lean body muscle mass, and also a decrease in VO2 max, which is also a decrease in fitness level. So anyone that was doing a number of fitness parameters or improving their fitness and strength prior to the pandemic, and if they have abstained from exercise thereafter, we then see a decrease in fitness and strength, just like anything else. But the COVID-19 pandemic has actually resulted in a number of persons being adversely affected with their training regime, partly due to the abstinence of training or participation in sport or exercise. So one of the most important things that comes with exercise in sport, as we all know, is intensity. And when one always asks, what is the intensity for getting back to match training? The question is, what is the duration? And the second question is, where do you actually start? So in terms of duration, there's different grounds. So if you're off for 1 week or less, the guideline is that you begin your plan where you've actually left off. If you're off up to 10 days, you start training 70% of your intensity. So if you've been training at an intensity that has been to your absolute maximum, you wouldn't train at that same maximal intensity if you've been off 1 week or less. As we see that the longer the duration away from exercise or sport, the lesser the intensity. And the result is that if you are going to maintain that same intensity with a longer duration away from sport, it can result from overtraining, from burnout, or even from fatigue. So it's very important that even before or after the pandemic, we listen to our body. It's very important that you listen to what your human body is saying, because that is the best indicator in terms of what you would need to do in terms of training intensity and exercise intensity as well. The next graph here then talks about a modified training period on return from reduced training. So what we see on the far left of your screen is the number of weeks of training at a specific load. All right, so weeks 2 to 8. The top of the table we see weeks of a modified training required to return to full training, and then at the bottom of the table we have percentage of training of normal training load completed. So this table is a very good guide that will assist individuals and as well as you as coaches or athletes or even sports scientists, to assist athletes or recreational persons to return to play before, during or after the lockdown. I do know that the PowerPoints will be shared with you, so you're more than welcome to refer to this table as a resource and as a guideline, and the source of this is the Australian Sports Commission that was published 5 years ago, which is still relevant in the context of the pandemic in terms of return to play and abstinence of exercise in sport. One of the most important things in sports science that we all know about, or even as coaches and trainers that we should know about, is the FIT principle. And the FIT principle usually stands for frequency, intensity, time, and the type of exercise. This still strongly applies in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So here we can see with frequency, one needs to elucidate how often is one training. In terms of intensity, how hard is one training? Intensity for me is the most important principle here in the context of the pandemic. If you haven't been training for a very long time, or if your athletes haven't been training due to the pandemic for a number of weeks, you've got to taper that intensity very carefully, because it can impede their performance and it can result in unwanted injuries, fatigue, or even overtraining, which will further hamper and slower their progress as they go down the line. So slower progression and smaller progressions as they lead up to the ideal goal post-pandemic or even returning to play. Time is really important. We've seen in previous tables and graphs that the duration of training or the duration of play really guides in terms of what one should do in combination with the intensity. And then lastly is the type. The type of training is so important, and what fitness methods one is using in terms of high interval training methods, different types of interval training, sprints, strength training, all of those different types of exercise are so important. So you as a coach, as a trainer, need to advise the athletes or the sports persons accordingly and taper that with the intensity. So the intensity from the FIT principle is the most important component for me in terms of the return to play guidelines in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. The other training principles that we've got to look out for and to take into account during athletes to reclaim their fitness is different concepts such as progression, reversibility, individuality, and overtraining. And I know a number of coaches and trainers who are watching this would be familiar with these, but in order to remind you of what this is, progression talks about slower progression and smaller goals that lead up to larger goals. Do not do a quick fix with your athlete. Because they have been away from training for 8 weeks doesn't mean we got to get them back up with a high intensity. You've got to start them slower, gradual increase, and then take the progression in smaller stages. Reversibility is the concept that illustrates that fitness cannot be banked. All right. So just like time cannot be banked. Once time is done, it's done. So training needs to be regular, or else the fitness is lost with rest or inactivity. So consistency here is key. We've got to keep training on a more consistent basis. Then we come in terms of individuality. We cannot paint everyone with the same brush. There's no one size fits all approach. Treating athletes and recreational persons as an individual is very important when it comes to training and when it comes to return to play. So that's what individuality refers to. It relates to the fact that no two persons are alike and that their training responses will differ, and therefore the individualized fitness programs are very, very essential. Uniqueness in each person is very important. In physiology, there's a concept known as homeostasis, which talks about the state of the body returning to a state of equilibrium or balance. And because of that, every individual that we work with has a very unique state of homeostasis. And just because of that exercise physiological variable, it's even more important to treat every athlete differently. So see how your athlete is responding, see what their goals are. Their different outlook would be different in terms of BMI, body fat percentage, height, stature, any risk factors, or even in terms of previous injuries, medical history, etc. There's a whole list. So we've got to treat athletes and recreational persons very differently. The last one there is overtraining. If you're going to improve or increase the intensity and the type very quickly at the early onset of returning to play, it may result in overtraining. So that's what overtraining is. It means that if too much effort or too much is done too soon for a prolonged period of time, staleness could be a factor in slow improvement or no improvement in fitness. And some factors for these are poor sleeping patterns. So if you see athletes are not sleeping adequately, sleep is one of the most important risk factor for poor performance or even for injury occurrence. So sleeping patterns can actually alter. Poor eating, unwarranted stress, and irritability or mood changes are some of the symptoms of overtraining. And in most cases, if the athlete takes a rest period to recover, it will accelerate training. So recovery and rest is essential. So moving on to the next slide. So this table that you see now talks to the risk categories. If the cameraman can just keep quiet. So the risk categories for participation in returning to play is really important. Okay, so this table that you see over here talks about all the most common sports that are currently being done within the South African context. So on the left side of the table you have the different sports activities, and in the other three columns you've got the risk category in terms of lowest risk, medium risk, and highest risk. So I'm not really going to go through this table for this essence of time, but when you guys do receive this PowerPoint as a resource, I want you to use this very carefully, whether you're a coach, athlete, or even as a trainer, to guide yourselves or your athletes or your clients in terms of what they can do dependent on what sports activity they participate in. So ideally, the lowest risk is really important. So that's where you ideally want them to be part of, and especially now with the coronavirus being increased in the strains coming along, we want to try and play more within the lower risk category. Further preventative measures are already things that we know already, but I cannot stress even more how important this is. Hand hygiene while playing is really important. Physical distancing is also really imperative. And these are the kinds of things that we need to be reminded of constantly, because even in the sports area, we shouldn't be taking this for granted. On the field, if it's group or team sports, we may just be individuals of 10 or 11, but it takes one person to spread the virus, and that can impede your training or your fitness. So these preventative measures are incredibly important. Do not hear what others are saying about where it's not really important to wear face masks, it's not really important to wear physical distancing. It is. You have to be physically distancing. You have to be wearing a mask. Right now in the camera studio where we are right now, there's just 2 or 3 people at this time. Physical distancing is incredibly important. Okay. In addition to that, traveling. So with athletes, there will come travel, either for training or for camps or even for matches. So to slow down transmission, many countries have imposed travel restrictions, and measures have ranged from suspending flights to banning travelers from affected countries to in-home isolation for 14 days after returning from specific destinations. So countries are also performing entry screening, including measuring their body temperature, obviously checking for fever, and assessing for signs and symptoms of COVID-19. Domestic travel in the context of South African travel has become challenging, as busy airports can be a common site of person-to-person spread. Especially now with the coming December break, we're now going to see that potentially the virus may increase because of increased travel. So please keep that in mind when it comes to sport and when it comes to return to play. You don't want to start the new year next year traveling in December alone or even with teams, potentially getting infected, and then again your return to play is infected, and more worse, potentially that your health can be degenerated because of the side effects and the adverse effects and the thrombotic effects that COVID-19 can have on an individual. Most importantly, face masks, and I think that's one of the most important things that people are now discussing. Do you train with the face mask? Do you not train with the face mask? So all athletes should be advised to wear a cloth mask to prevent becoming infected with COVID-19 in the community setting or while traveling, and that's according to the Center for Disease Control, according to 2019 and even now in 2020. So they were even according to Greenlee in 2020, and inappropriate use of medical masks can affect supply and demand to the point where athletes and recreational persons will have inadequate protection shields, and wearing masks for a prolonged makes breathing during training quite difficult. So it can also cause potential respiratory distress or even pulmonary conditions. So it is suggested that masks for athletes and recreational persons are innovated in a way that protection from the virus is still provided while breathing is also viable, and in the interim athletes can also use face shields. So I think that's the kind of balance that athletes and coaches need to be aware of, is when do you wear face masks, when do you not wear face masks, because in actual fact, if you're running for quite a prolonged period of time with a face mask, it can inhibit any respiratory distress, and some literature has also shown that it can cause some sort of cardiac kind of complications in the form of myocarditis or even pericarditis. So this is a nice infographic, an illustration documenting the practicalities of wearing a face mask during and after exercise, which was published by Van Rensburg in 2020 in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. So what they've shown here, I don't have a pointer, but the practicalities of wearing a mask during exercise, they actually provide different ways of how you can actually do it. So in conjunction with sanitizing and social distancing, they provide very good guidelines in terms of what you can do in terms of wearing your mask effectively and using it accordingly while you're exercising. So whether you're jogging, whether you're cycling, whether you're even playing team sports, it provides a nice guideline in terms of face mask wearing. So there's other lifestyle modifications that we also need to take into account. So physical activity and less sitting is important. In this camera booth right here, standing is ideal. So we shouldn't be promoting sedentary behavior, and especially in the context of exercise and sitting. So we need to try and stand more and sit less. And one of the most important risk factors is certainly adequate sleep. It has shown that anyone who has less than 6.5 hours of sleep per day can actually inhibit not just their health, but also in terms of injury risk in terms of playing sport. So do not underestimate sleep. The more sleep you have, the better. Think about it as your phone, like for battery life. If you're going to operate on 30 to 40% battery life in the day, your phone's not really going to perform well, and it will shut down sooner than you think. So sleeping time is certainly your battery, and we've got to prolong that battery life on a daily basis. Nutrition and eating. So in conjunction with taking preventative measures and optimizing training principles in different types of exercise and training guidelines, we really need to focus on what we eat. There has been literature that has shown that dependent on the macronutrient that you eat, whether it's fats, carbohydrates or proteins, can have an effect on not just the prevention of the virus, but even in terms, if you are infected, of how you would be able to recover from the virus. So please do take caution in what you eat and try and stay away from those sugary foods and those refined carbohydrates. Self-care is important, and especially coping with stress and anxiety. In the current pandemic, anxiety this year for many people has increased, and that can also affect your sport. So coping with stress and anxiety in different ways is really important. Exercise is really the antidote to stress and anxiety. So the more we exercise and the more we play sport, the better. Staying connected with loved ones from a support and from a social perspective, and lastly, even abstaining from smoking. There's mixed responses regarding this, where smoking doesn't really affect COVID-19, but when we look at respiratory physiology, it does. So please do abstain from cigarette smoking, and especially passive smoking in social circles. But hey, you wouldn't have to worry about passive smoking, because you should be doing physical distancing. So in conclusion, if I may wrap up, it is essential to take note of a number of factors that play an important role in one's fitness for full training readiness. This may take longer than anticipated, and if this is not conducted scientifically or with careful caution, there may be a setback. Example, an injury, a cardiovascular complication, or even on the road to reconditioning. It is essential to consider that full fitness is different to match readiness. So we shouldn't confuse the two. Match readiness versus full fitness is two different things. So we need to understand both of those and how important it is for our athletes and even for our recreational persons who want to return to play or even return to exercise. Players, coaches and support staff are encouraged to take heed from the guidelines and recommendations that I've provided today in terms of return to sports participation. These guidelines are essential in order to reduce or prevent infection during training or match play, but even optimize performance in the context of being absent from training or exercise during the pandemic and irrespective of the lockdown levels. It is important to note that one of the reasons for sports participation is to improve health and wellness, and as such it does not make sense to train or play sport without taking precautions, resulting in infection of the COVID-19 virus, and this infection will delay the return to play for various athletes. So lastly, all athletes and recreational persons should take precautions, be sensible, responsible, and make the important decisions when it comes to return to play. It is also recommended that relevant stakeholders please pay attention to the adoption of these guidelines, because it is for the betterment of athletes and for players. So my take-home message from this presentation is you've got to make time to move. Movement is life. We have been built to stand, to lie down and to move. We have not been built to sit and to have sedentary behavior. We haven't been built to not just do nothing. We have been built to move. Our ancestors have been built to hunt. So please make time to move while upholding the strictest guidelines for safety in the context of the pandemic, from the preventative measures that I've spoken about, and also for prevention of COVID-19. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you. That was very extensive and educative. Thank you so very much, Prof. I just got a question here from Tyrone Roskins, who asked, what is the best way to train inside and outside of a pool?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Tyrone. I think, while in the pool, there hasn't been a lot of literature that shows that the COVID-19 infection can really spread within water. But I think while in water, a face mask can come off. But even within the pool, physical distancing is very important. Coming out of the pool, it's the same thing. Mask on and you change up. So I think those preventative measures are important, that where necessary, please wear your mask at all times. I mean, right now in the camera booth, we're not really wearing masks, but we are maintaining our physical arm distance. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So that's really important. So even in the camera booth, we are taking those precautions. Wearing a mask at all times is prudent, unless you are eating, and unless you are obviously training in the pool, or unless you are showering at home, but that means you are also doing physical distancing. So when you are at home, it's fine, but when you're outdoors, you've got to try your best to wear your mask at all times. And with taking off and putting on the mask, you still got to sanitize prior and after being in the pool. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a question for myself as well. I think you've spoken about, the importance of sleep. I think you said, should be more than 6.5, 7 hours. How important is it, particularly for athletes, for them to ensure that they sleep enough, and how can it, hinder the fitness or something of that sort?
Absolutely. So you take a motor car, for example, you drive from Joburg to Cape Town the whole day for 18 hours.
Yeah.
You want to drive back the next day. What are the chances of that car surviving the whole way going on the road? Very slim. The car needs a break. It needs to cool down. Very similarly, the human body's physiology is different from a mechanical perspective, but sleep is definitely the recovery for our body. Yeah. We shouldn't underestimate it. It's been built into us for a number of reasons, physiologically, physically, and mentally, and even in terms of allowing to play and participate in exercise on a more optimum basis. So I cannot stress enough the importance of sleep. And even if you're struggling to sleep, I mean, there's a number of working mothers and fathers out there who have children, and who are either coaches or trainers, or they are even athletes themselves, where they said it's impossible to get 7 hours. But I mean, even if they're having 5 or 6 hours and they're taking a nap where they can, that power nap is like charging your phone on airplane mode for 50 minutes and boosting it up. It's very similar. So we've got to try and get as much rest and as much sleep as possible for athletes.
Yeah, and another one from SK, he asked, how do we handle the issue of social distancing, as we were asking an opponent? So I'm guessing that it should be something of being in a footballing pitch or playing rugby. How do we do social distancing? But I think it comes more into testing before match days. I think something of similar like that.
They do that, but I mean it's still a challenge though, because at the moment we're on the brink with this virus where we don't know who's asymptomatic. So they can do as much testing as they can and pick up those who are symptomatic and prevent them from being on the field. But we know that there's a number of days of that incubation period where we don't know if they're symptomatic or not. So that's a real issue, that we don't know who's asymptomatic, and we know of a couple of players, both in football, rugby and other players, who've been tested positive. And I think the most important thing that we are currently doing right now, whether we're athletes or not, is complacency. We really can't be complacent with this virus. It's really important to consider. So I think the moment we reduce complacency and start taking this seriously and take the best precautions possible, that's where we can try our best to prevent this virus. And so in the context of sport, it's very challenging, especially in the context of rugby, where it's a contact sport. I would say that the quarantine measures would need to be longer than 14 days because of that asymptomatic period.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the last one, just before you leave, Prof. Now this one comes from Tato. He or she is asking, what intensity should an athlete who recovered from COVID-19 train at? In terms of intensity, how far or how slow should the athlete train at?
That's a very good question. At the lowest intensity possible. And the reason for that is we are still seeing studies of athletes who have been the most fittest, who have actually been representing their countries for different types of sports, who have now still seeing adverse effects of the virus 6 to 8 weeks after being infected. So the lowest intensity possible after you've been infected, post-infection, the lowest intensity. Listen to your body, seeing what it's saying. Most of the time, symptoms from those athletes who have been, or even persons who have been infected, wanting to return to play sport is fatigue, it's weakness, it's longer sleeping times, it's reduced appetite, which means there's reduced energy. So it takes a long time to return back to normal play. And that's why we're stressing around preventative measures for COVID-19. You don't want to become infected, because if you are, the return to play is even longer after being infected because of the adverse effects and thrombotic effects that this virus has on the human body.
Yeah, absolutely. Prof, thank you so very much for your, discussion as well as presentation. Truly appreciate it. Now, just to remind our viewers, please do join the discussion via Zoom, YouTube, Twitter, as well as on Facebook. We are at Gauteng Department of Sports, Arts and Culture Recreation. That is where this webinar is live. So thank you so very much once again. Truly appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your morning and afternoon. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. We're just going to take a very short break, and then we're back again with the next speaker. That is Mrs. Nikki De Villiers. Thank you so very much. Do stay tuned.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating, because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done, because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga, let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating, because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done, because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga. Let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating, because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done, because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga. Let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating, because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done, because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga. Let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating, because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done, because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga, let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga, let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga, let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. Then we're ready, huh? You can go.
Yeah, welcome back to the webinar. Well, we're just having technical issues, rather, that is, in terms of trying to connect to Miss Nikki de Villiers, so we are trying to connect with her. But at the moment in time, just please do follow us on our hashtag, that is Gauteng Cares, as well as Growing Gauteng Together. It's been a fantastic and, educative seminar thus far, if you like. So, just to remind our viewers, the Gauteng Academy of Sports has 5 regional district academies located across the the entire province, you can contact the Gauteng Department of Sports head office is based in 35 Resik, that is in Street Johannesburg, for more information regarding the academy program, and you can also get involved as a coach or an athlete. So yeah, that is the latest. But please do bear with us. We are trying to get Ms. Nikki Delavilles on air with us. We're having a bit of a technical glitch in terms of trying to get her back, but we are working very hard and seamlessly to try to get her back with us. So please do understand. I mean, we're going virtual, so we're still learning, trial and error in terms of this. But yeah, our technical guys are working tirelessly very hard to try and get her back online with us. That is Ms. Nikki Delavilles. Now she will be presenting the boosting and the immune system and the cost-effective eating plan. So it's very, very important and imperative that athletes understand what they're eating, the plans and the patterns that they do it with, because food can really slow down, if you like, your performance on the pitch. So yeah, please do once again bear with us. We are trying to get her back. That is Miss Nikki, so she will be with us shortly. Now also just going back to a bit of history in terms of the Gauteng Department of Sports. Now in recent times it is continuous success of the provincial netball teams such as the Gauteng Jaguars and the Gauteng Fireballs, with the Gauteng Jaguars being the current netball Telkom netball champions for the fourth successive year. So they are the champions of netball 4 years in succession. So dates back to 2016 at that age, and this has led to 15 players from Gauteng being selected to be part of the netball South African squad. So yeah, that is some of the history that we have with you. But as I said, we are trying to get Miss Nikki Delavilles back with us, and yeah, we will be having her. She'll be discussing, or her presentation rather, as I say, just to remind all our viewers here, is that she'll be speaking about boosting the immune system and cost-effective eating plans. So just a couple of more moments, we'll be having her live with us. So we are going to take a short break once again and try to get her online. Just patience is a virtue, and this is one of the aspects that we truly do need, and appreciate your patience in regard to that. So we'll take a short break now, and we're back again after a couple of moments.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating, because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There is indeed a lot that still has to be done, because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga, let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating, because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There is indeed a lot that still has to be done, because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga, let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga, let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga, let's enjoy this Women's Day.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our
but the best. Hope you'll enjoy it.
Hello, beautiful people. Bezos Dumilis. I'd like to say Happy Women's Day and Happy Women's Month to all the beautiful and courageous women out there. Love.
Why can't you see? We are meant to be. Stop running, stop running, stop running, stop running away from me. Stop running, stop running, stop running, stop running away from me. You should be my man. You should be my man. You should be my man. Why can't you see? You should be my man. You should be my man. You should be my man. Why can't you see? Why can't you see? I just wanna be with you. Why can't you see? If you should be my man. You should be my man. You should be my man. Why can't you see? You should be my man. You should be my man. You should be my man. Why can't you see?
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day and it's a day worth celebrating because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, Today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga, let's enjoy this Women's Day.
We are back again. Just once again, would like to really apologize, for the, technical issues that we are experiencing here. But I understand that it's now fixed. Just our utmost, apologies for what has happened. And we finally have Ms. Nikki de Villiers here with us now. Just her presentation is based on boosting the immune system and cost-effective eating plans. Now, a bit of a biography of this fantastic woman. Well, Ms. de Villiers graduated, that is, as a dietitian at the University of Pretoria and completed a postgraduate diploma through the International Olympic Committee out in Switzerland and a master's degree in dietetics. Now, her career started as a dietitian at the Charlotte Maxeke Hospital and later in private practice at the Pretoria Heart Hospital. She is a part-time lecturer of sport nutrition for students studying sports science, biokinetics, dietetics, as well as medical doctor specializing in sports at the University of Pretoria. Now, finally, Ms. de Villiers has been in private practice for the past 23 years, so that tells you the type of experience she has. A lovely, lovely woman to have with us. A very good morning to you, Ms. Nikki de Villiers, and how are you?
I'm very, very good, thank you. Thanks for the patience of everybody waiting for us. Really honored to be here. I'm really happy to chat this morning.
Thank you so very much. So I'm now going to cross over to you to start your lovely presentation. And to all our viewers as well on our social media platforms, please do, write down your questions. And immediately when she's done with her presentations, I'll send through the questions to her so that she can answer them. But once again, thank you so very much for your patience and our utmost apologies from our side. So it is now up to Mrs. de Villiers to start your presentation. Thank you so very much once again.
Thanks so much. So I'm not sure if you can see the screen or the presentation, but in terms of the human immune system, we need to acknowledge that it's quite a complex network of cells, antibodies, and proteins. I'm not sure, guys, I can't see the presentation on my screen. There we go. All right. So it is quite a complex network of cells, antibodies, and proteins. So therefore, if we look at nutrition and the involvement of nutrition, it's virtually all over. So we need to be assured that the baselines are right most of the time. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, and there just a little picture of a body in terms of where the immune system sits, and that we can see it's right throughout the whole body, that it's not just situated in one part of the body. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you look at the immune system, I'm not going to go through the whole slide because it's quite huge, but there's certain layers of the immune system that we have to pay attention to. If you can just click on the next slide, please. So we have to look at the physical in barriers. So the physical barriers basically just represents what is protecting us from stuff coming into our bodies. So that would be something like the skin, the mucous membrane, and so forth. Then we've got immune cells, which is the army of the body. And then we also got antibodies, which is basically the stuff, the weapons that we fight with. And if we then look at how the body responds, I'm not going to go into great detail, but we've got what we call an innate system, which is an immediate system that the body would react towards stuff coming in. And then there's an acquired immune system where on the long term, it will then start making antibodies to fight whatever we have to have. Next slide, please. Okay, you can go through that. Next slide. This and next one. Next one. Okay, so what defines if we have a good one? So we know that our immune system is constantly on the alert. It monitors whatever wants to come into the body, and that monitors those armies must then decide if it's worthwhile fighting or not fighting, and what mechanism they need to fight with. So we always have to look at the food soldiers versus the specialized forces, and nutrition obviously influence all of that. And then more and more also looking at, first of all, my resistance towards training, towards getting sick. So what will prevent me from getting sick? But also then, once I am sick, is there certain things in terms of food that we can do that will basically decrease the symptoms or decrease the time that I'm sick for? And nutrition have an influence on both of these. Next slide, please. So if we look at food and immunity, which is on the next slide coming in, there's quite a few things that will be influenced through the food that we take. So it is basically the immune system army march on what is in its stomach. So we look at nutrition deficiencies that can negatively influence our immune system. So with a poor diet, there's usually an increase in the amount of infections. There's also very slow healing when we have infections, and then the complication from the immune system dysfunction that will last quite a long time thereafter. So if we look at nutrients, and we're going to look at these individually, we always have to look at the macronutrients, the vitamins, and the minerals. Next slide, please. So the nutrients to support the immune system, first of all, the macronutrients, remember these are the ones that give kilojoules. So first of all, energy. So if we don't eat enough energy, it means that there will be a budget cut to the immune system. So if we undereat in terms of volume of food, the immune system will have a budget cut and won't be able to optimize their function. Carbohydrate is important. That's part of the energy sources that we have to supply, and that controls our blood sugar, which is important for immune system function. We need to make sure that we eat protein. So the protein is basically the ammo. It's the ammunition that the body will fight with. So therefore, that is important. And if you look at the fat intake, that must be sufficient so that there's essential fatty acid, and that will help with the anti-inflammatory process. So the fatty acids will be found in salmon, flax seeds, walnuts, so often seed and nut mixes. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through the micronutrients quite quickly. So I'm going to go through it quite quickly in terms of which micronutrients, because I want to get to the practical implication. So in terms of vitamin A is quite important because it keeps our epithelium layer intact, so the barrier, so that stuff can't come in. So vitamin A sources is usually, the better sources is liver, egg yolk, butter, full cream milk, and cheese, but it's also in green leafy veggies. And if you eat a sweet potato in its skin, or a cup of raw carrots a day, that provides us with the amount of vitamin A we need. Next slide, please. The next slide is the vitamin C. I think most people are aware of the vitamin C, and that everybody was asked to take vitamin C. So that is in fruits, especially the citrus fruits, also now green leafy vegetables, potatoes, and so forth. And that will decrease the time and the severity of the symptoms, that once you're sick, you can recover faster from that. So if you have a half a cup of sweet red pepper or 3/4 cup of orange juice per day, that should give you the amount of vitamin C that you need. Next slide, please. If we look at vitamin D, there's also been quite a hype in the whole COVID story, is the intake of vitamin D. So vitamin D, the main area where we get vitamin D is if there's sunlight on the skin. So we need to make sure that we're in sunlight often, so about 20 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week. Or otherwise, you can get vitamin D through the oily fish that we eat, like sardines, pilchards, mackerel, those kind of things, but also in liver and egg yolk. Next slide, please. The last one of the fat-soluble vitamins is vitamin E. So vitamin E we get in vegetable oils, and we also get it in leafy green vegetables, a lot in the nuts. You guys can move to the next slide, please. Also in nuts like almonds or peanuts that you eat, or peanut butter, or then seeds, sunflower seeds and so forth. Also quite high in avocado, which is quite in season currently. Next slide, please. The B vitamins that's quite important. The first one is vitamin B6, very important because it supports our immune function. So how can we get it? Usually through the intake of chicken, liver, fish, nuts, chickpeas, but also again the green leafy veggies. If you eat a cup of chickpeas or 3 medium-sized potatoes, that will give you about 50% of the vitamin B6 that we need. Vitamin B. Next slide, please. Next slide is vitamin B12. The vitamin B12 is very important for the production of the antibodies in the body. So the antibody is the stuff that actually fights the infection. Again, in liver, quite high. Also in the fishes that we eat. Vitamin B12 is also quite abundant in milk or milk products, and then also in eggs. Next slide, please. Folic acid, also, I think some of you know folic acid is vitamin B6, and that is also important for normal cell division and then the cell-mediated immunity. That will be in green leafy vegetables, beans, lentils, asparagus, peanuts again, and then the oranges. Next slide. If we then move into the minerals that's important, I think zinc has also been very, very much discussed in terms of the COVID. So zinc is extremely important in antibody production. And the zinc sources get is through meat, some of our shellfish. You also get it in legumes like chickpeas, lentils, baked beans, and then in whole grains. Next slide, please. Selenium, also quite an important one, also in the nuts that we eat, whole grains, with other words, whole wheat stuff, dairy products, and also in fruit and vegetables. And next slide, please. The other one is iron. So iron is quite important for the immune cell production, and often we find when people are iron deficient, so they're much more prone to getting infections. And the iron mainly found in liver, red meat, and poultry and shellfish, also quite a lot in eggs. And then again in our legumes, which is basically our chickpeas, lentils, and beans. Next slide, please. The last one is copper. Now, copper is a small little one, but we also need to have it for the inflammatory response. Also in most of our seafoods, our nuts, whole grains. So I think as I talk, you will find that theme going on quite throughout. Next slide, please. Then there's also quite a new thing in terms of polyphenols. Now, polyphenols is plant-based substances and many dietary sources, and that will also reduce the symptoms of the common cold. So that is when we eat berries and cherries, also in cocoa powder. So if you eat chocolate, which would be good, news for a lot of people, or cocoa, in milk, also in beans that we eat, a lot of the nuts has got the polyphenols in it, veggies, green tea, and then for some of us, good news, it's also in red wine. Next slide, please. The main thing here, although if you look at the immune system, by no means was this an intention so that you can read the slide, but all those circles that you see in the slide, the blocks indicate the immune system, and the circles is where the specific nutrients work in the immune system. And by this, I just want to explain again the complexity of the immune system, and that the immune function is basically right throughout, and all these nutrients basically is right throughout the immune system. So there's no a specific nutrient that I can tell you, take this one, this will boost the immune system. It is basically based on a good diet, on an everyday intake. Next slide, please. There's also been a strong connection between gut health, so what's going on in your gut, and our resistance against getting infection. So in terms of our gut microbes, in other words, bacteria that stays in our guts, we are also then advised to eat probiotics. Now, probiotics is basically the bacteria that we're eating, and it's very abundant in yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, also pickles, and then in amazi or Mars. And then there's stuff that will make these bacteria grow, which is usually referred to as prebiotics. And the prebiotics will be found in food like tomatoes, onions, banana, garlic, asparagus, berries, flax seeds, and also again the legumes like chickpeas, lentils, and baked beans. Next slide, please. Okay, so the athlete's risk for getting sick is much higher, and that's we have to acknowledge in the sense that because they are in an increased stress environment, because they have frequent contact with other people, also in large crowds, but also because they breathe more. So the rate and the depth of their breathing will also increase their risk of getting sick. Next slide, please. So what athletes should do and try and avoid getting sick is basically make sure that you can go to the next slide, please. So they should basically make sure that whenever they go into training, they fulfill in these guidelines, that they eat enough energy, that they eat enough protein, enough carbohydrate. A very, very important one is that they have to take carbohydrate during training sessions, so Energate, Powerade, Gain, oral sugar water during the training session. Make sure that there's adequate hydration, because the dehydrated state will also make you more prone for getting sick. Monitor your vitamin D status, with other words, stay in the sun, and then also maybe thinking of a probiotic supplement. Next slide, please. So what should we do on a day-to-day basis? First of all, if you look at the food groups, which is the dairy group, the vegetable group, fruit, grains, and protein group, we need to make sure that we get food from all those groups every single day. So dairy group, for instance, milk and cereal, the vegetable group with lunch and supper, fruit group to have at least 2 to 3 fruits every day, the grains that we eat, the porridges, the cereals, the pap, the wheat mixes, to have whole grains of those, and to make sure that we have protein like meat, fish, chicken, but also baked beans, chickpeas, lentils with regular intervals. Next slide, please. All right, so what we try and do is when you compile a plate of food, that we have a slice of that food basically going to fruit and vegetables. And we usually refer that half the plate should be these fruit and vegetables. A quarter of the plate that we eat should then be protein foods like the nuts, the beans, chickpeas, lentils, meat, fish, and a quarter of the plate then the grains, which should be whole grain. Next slide, please. So apart from that, also then to pay specific emphasis on, sorry, just go back one, sorry. The specific emphasis should be on eating fatty fish twice per week. If we have legumes, 3 times a week. So twice a week, so pilchards on toast on the one day. The other day, if you have hake with potatoes. Then to have legumes 2 to 3 times a day. So say I have baked beans on toast the one day. I have bean salad with my pap and my meat the other day, and maybe lentils with the rice. We try to include nuts and seeds daily. So nuts at the moment is quite expensive, but seeds like sunflower seeds, quite affordable. And then to also have a rainbow of fruit and vegetables. So have green ones and yellow ones, but at least try to get to 5 portions. With other words, we will have a fruit with breakfast, we will have a salad with lunch, like tomato and lettuce with your sandwich, and tonight we will have maybe broccoli and carrots for supper, and then an additional 2 fruits for snacks in between. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to end off, it doesn't really matter how many vitamins you take or how many smoothies you drink or how many herbal supplements you buy. You cannot boost your immune system. We can just support the immune system so that it does the job in a great way. And supporting the immune system is basically by eating well. But if there's a deficiency, we can take a supplement. But your first line is not a supplement, because otherwise the supplement will not necessarily boost the immune system. It will drain your bank account because you're paying money towards supplements that should go towards food, and it creates a very expensive urine in a sense that if you don't need it, you will just excrete it. Thanks so much for your patience and your time. I'm going to be on here to handle any questions.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Nikki. We truly do appreciate it. And actually, there is a couple of questions here from our viewers from all social media platforms. Now, the first one is there any specific meal known to boost the athlete who is recovering from COVID-19?
Yeah, so the meal should be quite high. So I would include fish. Fish would be a good one because it's anti-inflammatory. To include at least 2 or 3 vegetables on that plate. Yeah. So something like a green leafy one, plus an orange one, plus another one. So say, for instance, we will eat cabbage with beetroot, with spinach, and then also include, if you can, as snacks in between, to have a handful of nuts with fruits in between. So that would be quite good. So refrain to food, healthy food stuff, and not extra supplements, and then decrease your refined sugars. So for instance, no sweets and chocolates and those kind of things, but rather fruit and vegetables as such.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the second one is from Mr. Diamond. It's a bit of a lengthy one. Now, he says, according to presentation by Prof. Martin Swenis, we have viruses laying dormant. What and how many of us might already have this virus laying dormant in us and just needs to be activated or triggered, especially in our elite athletes?
Yeah, I think that should have been a question for Prof. Schmalnus, but it is true that your body, that innate immune system that I spoke about, is your body is fighting stuff all the time, and we won't necessarily feel symptoms from everything coming in because the body takes care of it. It's just that if the onslaught is too hard, or otherwise in these situations where you're not well fed. So if we don't have nutrient deficiencies, that can then trigger because the immune system then doesn't have enough of the energy to fight whatever's coming in. So there is dormant stuff, but it's not necessarily dormant that it's waiting. It is basically the body is taking care of it as we sit here. So therefore, we just need to make sure that our lifestyle is in such a way that we support the army that's fighting on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we switch our attentions to Tyrone Roskins, who's also asking a very interesting question out on Facebook. Now he's asking, I have children aged 8 as well as 17. What can you recommend for stamina for my swimmers?
Okay, so the main thing there, in terms of stamina, I gather he's talking about energy. And
Yes.
the main energy food is carbohydrates. So I cannot emphasize big enough that athletes should eat something before they train, and it should be a fuel food. So something like cereal and milk or fruit or sandwich or peanut butter sandwich or something like that. And then also if training sessions go longer than an hour or an hour and a half, then to make sure that they have carbohydrate sources in the training set. So drinking whatever cold drink they have at home. It can be Oros, it can be Energy, Powerade, Gain, to put that into a bottle and have it during their training sets. And then afterwards, the recovery must be with a fuel food, which is then starchy thing or fruity thing, but always in combination with a protein. I think most of us know or have heard the message that having a chocolate-flavored milk is basically a very, very good recovery meal. But I think if Tyron, if you have to check the boxes, thanks for that question. First of all, ask your swimmer, did they eat something before they came to training? And if they say yes, ask what they ate, and what they ate must be starch or fruit. And the last block to tick is, did you drink fluid? So a lot of our decrease in stamina is because we enter training sets in a dehydrated state.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, lastly, another one from Derek Petter. I think, this is a very informative one that you've spoken about your presentation. Now, the last one is from Derek Petter, as I said. Now, an athlete between the age of 15 to 25 that competes at distance 100 to 400 meters, what would provide sustained energy for the last 30 to 40 meters to counter attack acid that does kick in?
Okay, that's quite a good question, and it's quite a specialized one.
Yeah.
So what is happening in that kind of, if you train at that or compete in that kind of intensity or train, you use carbohydrate as a main fuel source. So I think that is the first important thing, to make sure that you have fuel tank to get into the training set. So eat carbohydrates before. The buffer effect is usually something that's innate to the body. So with other words, the more we train, the better we become at buffering that acidity of the lactic acid system. And then there is some supplements that you can use to try and buffer the acidity. But the main thing there would be, especially if you take food in consideration, to make sure the green ones are there, because the green ones are usually green leafy veg, spinach, morocco, broccoli, those kind of things are usually there to buffer the acidity. And then also make sure then there's enough fuel to do this work. Afterwards, again, to make sure there's a protein with a carb source. So afterwards, the protein becomes more important so that it can support your body to grow better buffering systems.
Yeah, well, we're just about to end in terms of questions, but there's just the last one. I think this is really what you call extra time in football terms. Now, Pule Based asks, what food can be taken to boost power while watching weight for boxers?
Yeah, quite an important one, because boxers are usually struggling weight, and they're usually on, they're one of the categories that's actually quite at risk for getting sick, because they often eat too little to weigh less. So afterwards, it is quite important that protein will be the emphasis for them, but that when we eat protein, we need to make sure it's low in fat so that we don't have excess kilojoules coming in. Yep. So good whey protein, or if you use milky products, to use a fat-free type of milk product. And I would always combine that with a fruit. So I would have a banana with milk, or yogurt cut up with milk, or something like a Mars. A Marzi would be a good one, or even Maheu for them would be a good recovery afterwards. Just because we don't have that much of an energy budget to work with, we have to make sure that every nutrient we put into the body is counting towards recovery and not necessarily towards weight.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much, Ms. Nikki. We truly appreciate your time and your lovely presentation. I think, most of our viewers were waiting for this one, particularly your one, because you were specifying or talking about nutrition. It's one of the most important aspects for athletes. So thank you so very much for your time. Truly appreciate it, and do enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And just before that, our utmost apologies, for the technical issues that we experienced early on. But thank you so very much for your time. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the time. Really been an honor spending time with you guys, and have a good day further on.
Thank you so very much. And now please do continue hashtagging us. It is Gauteng Cares on Twitter, as well as hashtag Growing Gauteng Together. That is what we are trending with out at the moment on Twitter. So please do follow those hashtags. Now the next speaker is going to be Mrs. Martinise van Gaal. She's a sports psychologist by profession. Now her presentation is going to be about mental toughness. Now just a bit of a bio about this fantastic woman as well. Now Martinise van Gaal completed her MA Counseling Psychology degree with specialization in sports psychology at the University of Pretoria. She is a registered counseling psychologist with HPCSA. She has been in private practice for 7 years and is currently the head of the sports psychology department at Sports Exercise Medicine and Lifestyle Institute. And finally, Ms. van Gaal has worked with provincial and school teams, as well as elite athletes, both recreational and professional athletes. So that is Mrs. Martinise van Gaal, who will be speaking to us shortly in regard to her presentation. And as I said, it's about mental toughness. I mean, being a professional sportsman or woman, it's very important, for one to be mentally strong, as the challenges, on and off the pitch can be very challenging, to say the least. So we are going to be having her shortly with us, as we are trying to connect with her. But I understand that she is now on, so we are going to cross over to her, and as one of the most best, varsities that is in South Africa, that is TAG. So we are trying to get her online, but please do bear with us at the moment in time. Just please do go back to our social media sites. That is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as YouTube. We are streaming live, and please do use the hashtag Gauteng Cares, as well as Growing Gauteng Together. And there's another one, just the sneak in here. It is Academy on hashtag Academy is on the move. So those are the hashtags that we have. So yeah, we are still trying to get hold of the next speaker, but she will be with us shortly. As I said, a sports psychologist, then speaking about mental toughness. So I understand that is she back with us? Not yet. So yeah, we are going to be speaking about that. And one thing that comes to mind, okay, I was just going to tell you something important, but I think being told that she's back with us, so she is going to start her presentation with us. A very good afternoon to you, Ms. Martinise van Gaal. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I look forward to having a discussion on mental toughness with you today.
Precisely. Thank you so very much once again for your time. Just before you start, let me just remind all our viewers on our social media platforms to please do send their questions through while you are, presenting your segment to us. But yeah, just this is now your time. Please do, take it away, inform us, educate us. That is very important. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your presentation. We're back again after a couple of minutes with you to take the question. Thank you so very much. It is your time.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen with you guys now to get you to show my presentation to you. I hope I received some feedback and really you can see it or not. It is showing on my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, I think we can see it. Let me just, I'm being told that we can see it. Is it fine on your end?
Yes, I just want to wait. Yes, it's. I'm just going to switch mine.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, we are ready. Thank you so very much. You can begin your presentation. Thank you once again.
Okay, thank you. Let me just get it started there. Perfect. Yeah, so as we said, we're going to be talking about mental toughness. There are a lot of different definitions of what mental toughness is about, but today I'll take you through the one that makes the most sense for me. So just taking you through what we'll be discussing, we'll look at what is mental toughness, what is mental preparation, why is it important, also when does it start, and how do you mentally prepare. Hopefully, if we do have time, I'll take you through a mindfulness activity so that you can get a feel for it. this is what we'll cover today. So what is mental toughness? Usually every athlete and coach that I work with have their own understanding of what mental toughness is about. For me, it's just the ability to act consistently and making the right decisions based on your values. It requires commitment to your values. So if we look at performance, if we base our performance on how we feel, it is likely that our performance will suffer and be very inconsistent. Can you still hear me? Yeah, so with mental toughness, we really want you to base your performance on your values and not on your emotions. Emotions are a bit of a roller coaster. And if I had to ask you how many days a year you would work or do your sport when you feel good, it will probably be in the range of 1, maybe 5 days a year that you will work. So we can see that if we base performance and mental toughness on emotions, we're in for a rough ride. But if we base it on values, it's much more consistent and it holds us to a higher standard. So if, for example, I'm feeling tired today and I don't feel like training, yes, of course, it would be easiest to then just quit training or not go to training. But if I base it on my value of being hardworking, of being committed, it's much more likely that I'll actually attend the training session and get the most out of it. And so during COVID, it's been extremely hard on athletes and players from all walks of life because suddenly they have a lot of time on their hands. They're not used to being just sitting at home or not having access to going to the gym or going to the pitch and actually being cooped up. And here, for a lot of them, their understanding of mental toughness has really been put to the test. And really the only thing that most of them had to work on during this time was working on their mental toughness and working on their mental preparation. So if we move on to more of mental toughness, when the focus is on values, the following habits. Like we said, you train harder. Your training is also more consistent because you'll simply not give up. Even if you're tired, you'll try and push through if your value is one of perseverance, of never giving up. You will also start making better choices on and off the track or on and off the field. So if being loyal, if being committed to what you want to achieve is one of your values, you will make those tough decisions of not going out with friends the evening before a game or the evening before a track because you know it will hinder performance the next day. And you're also likely to persevere in your daily activities. So still being able to balance school and balance training, which for some of our younger athletes can be very, very tough because they just find that they don't have time to do their homework. They don't have time to get together with their friends. They have to excuse themselves of family functions because sports is obviously played more regularly over the weekends. And that can be quite taxing on them. But the value-directed choices lead to enhanced performance. And as a coach, it also means that you can play a role in creating this culture where it's a value-directed culture where the values of being in the squad is being punctual or making sure that you don't drop the squad, and you can model those values, and you will see that the athletes will follow. With all the athletes and players that I work with, when I ask them who's the biggest influence in your sporting career, at least 90% of the time they will say that it's the coach. And if you can model these values and they're receptive to it, it will help to create an environment of mental toughness. It's also important to discuss with the athletes what is their understanding of mental toughness. What does mental toughness mean to them? Because sometimes they will say, "Yeah, it's sacrificing time with friends, or it's sacrificing time to do homework, or things like that." And that's actually not the case. Sacrificing your time with friends to be at a training session is simply what is needed to be successful. That is not in essence a sacrifice. So if you know that, you can challenge that belief and get them on board with what mental toughness is, and that they need to perform optimally at every training session, or at least try to perform optimally at every training session. If we look at mental preparation, which is then definitely the cornerstone of mental toughness. Mental toughness isn't just a switch. It isn't something that just happens on game day or on race day. And usually I explain this by saying that you don't just train once a week and then show up thinking that you'll win. It's really not that simple. Performance is much more complex than that. And just as you would physically prepare, you also need to mentally prepare. And the reason for that is simply that if you're not mentally prepared, you will very inconsistently hit mental toughness. Here and there, you'll have a game or a race where you'll perform very well, but for the most part, you are likely to struggle and not consistently perform well, and run the risk of being a bit of a one-hit wonder. So, what is mental preparation and why do we do it? It's ensuring that your mind and your body is in the same place at the same time. So, for example, if your athlete is busy training, not thinking about the penalty shot that they missed just before that, or they had a fight with a parent or their girlfriend or boyfriend, and their mind is worried about what happened there, but they are on the track or busy with a race, and of course that will influence performance in a negative manner. It's also setting goals for the meet or the race, the game. What is it that they would like to achieve and get out of it? Is it that they want to improve on their cross-court play if they're a tennis player? Is it that they want to improve on their start if they're an athlete? So really having process goals, so not going for a win, which creates a lot of pressure. And for some athletes, they can deal with that. But for the most part, if you say we're going for the win, it actually creates unnecessary pressure. And also having routine or certain activities that help build that. That's also why you have a warm-up before you physically start to play. It's to prepare your body physically for what is to come. And that is where the routine or certain activities come in from a mental side to make sure that you are ready and switched on in order to perform optimally. And then also lastly, just focusing on values. So if your value is one of persevering, then it's not dropping your head when the other team is ahead, or not becoming completely deflated when you ended up not or just barely just qualifying for the semi-final race. It's really about going, okay, well, this didn't work. What am I going to do next to ensure success? And then I've added a quote there of Muhammad Ali, who said, "Until you are mentally ready, you will never be physically prepared." And the mental side of sport really, and especially during the time of COVID, is just playing a more and more prominent role. So why is mental preparation important? Of course, it leads to enhanced performance. It is increased. It leads to increased mental toughness. So it means that you have the ability to perform under pressure while remaining calm, and that you are able to bounce back from obstacles. So whatever it happens, whether the event is running late or you're playing against people who are much stronger or perceived to be better than you are able to deal with that effectively and not allow outside factors to influence your performance in a negative manner. It leads to improved focus, so you are able to just concentrate better and just block out the noise and not get involved in off the court incidences or getting swept up with a ref or an umpire that is against you or not giving you the benefit of the doubt. So strong focus is also definitely a form of mental toughness and a component that is under an athlete's control and can be worked on and improved on as they progress. It also leads to a better work ethic. So if you can imagine that all of your players or your athletes show up at training focused, switched on, of course the intensity of the training will improve. Once the intensity of the training has improved, the goals will be reached more effectively, and they'll start competing for one another, with one another during training sessions, which means that the whole squad is improving and becoming stronger and stronger. And this is important in the classroom, but also obviously on the sport field. It is extremely important. So it also leads to improved self-confidence and self-belief. So you can imagine that for many athletes, the way that they approach an event or a game is that they look back at their preparation for this. So if they've attained a training, they feel confident that my body can perform. If they've been with the sports scientist and they've gone through the motions and the fitness tests there, they feel more confident. If they've been to the dietitian and they're eating properly and they're feeling refreshed and ready, then of course they will be more confident and there will be an improved self-belief going in. So if what Usain Bolt said there, you can see on your screen, if you turn up worrying about how you're going to perform, you've already lost. And that for me just puts it beautifully into perspective, because that means that you are worried about things that are outside of your control and that have not yet happened. Whereas if you just focus on your values and what you've done up until that point to get there, then you stand a chance to really perform optimally and reach your full potential. And this is also why I see some of the athletes and players that the coach will say, but during training, this person just performs beautifully and they do everything. But come race day or come game day, it's just they become this nervous person that just makes silly mistakes. And that is usually because they're not present in the here and now. They're already thinking about the future or what their parents will say, what the coach will say, and that takes their focus away from what actually is happening here and now, and that's all that they have control over. So just a question, usually this works a lot better when I see people in front of me, but when does mental preparation start? And usually this is one of the first questions that I ask athletes or the coaches, and some will say, well, it starts on race day. And as I've explained earlier, that really means that the mental preparation hasn't been in place, which leads to a risk of inconsistent performance, or worse still, a lack of performance. So for me, mental preparation is just as important as physical preparation, and it's something that happens daily. It becomes a habit. And just as your physical fitness increases, so does your mental fitness. But it will only increase if you try and implement something every day. Otherwise, if you just leave it to race day or on the day of the competition, there's a big risk that it will simply not go the way that you want it to go. So, of course, like I said, it starts at training. It's just as important as physical preparation. You wouldn't only train once or twice a week if you go for a tournament. I heard one of the people say, yeah, the Fireballs and the Jaguars are the two teams. They've got 15 players going into the netball, the SA netball squad. And of course, for them, mental preparation starts during training. It doesn't just start when they are announced into the squad. For them, it started long before. And it's something that really needs to be trained every day. Usually I would say to the athletes that even if it's 5 minutes before a training session, just thinking, what is it that I would like to achieve from this session? It is extremely important, because it brings the focus back to what needs to happen now. It's like I've said now numerous times, it's not a switch that you can just flip and on race day or on the day of the competition, it will just magically fall into place. Then you leave it a bit up to the universe and lady luck, and again, that will lead to inconsistent performance and really frustration for the coach and the athlete. And like I also alluded to earlier, the more you mentally prepare, the fitter you get, which means it becomes just a habit. And as you do it, very limited time needs to be spent there, because you are so used to that way of thinking that it just happens. So usually for athletes and even for coaches, the question then becomes, how do you mentally prepare? What do you use to develop mental toughness, which is the aim? So it's important for a coach to understand, and even for athletes to understand, that every person has their own approach towards mental toughness. For some, they prefer listening to music and completely withdrawing themselves you mustn't talk to them, you mustn't even look at them. Some perceive them to be a bit moody. You just need to leave them, and then they can perform. Others become quite nervous, and they will just chat and chat and chat and chat and chat, and they need to be around people, and they're the ones constantly moving around, sometimes frustrating the coach because they're all over the show, but that is their way of dealing with it. So it's important to understand how every athlete that you coach, how they deal with it, by just having a discussion with them and figuring out what makes them tick, and also figuring out what factors actually take away from their ability to perform optimally. For example, is it parents? Is it a friend that makes a snide comment? Is it something on social media that they read just before the game or on the morning of it that really throws them off? And also, if you move into more team sports, there it's important to also as a team decide what makes this team mentally tough. What are factors? Is it just by clapping hands? Is it having a certain song? Is it having a certain ritual when you warm up? Where does the mental toughness and the mental strength of the team lie, so that the team can draw on it, but also that the individual can draw on it. I've used Usain Bolt and Wade van Niekerk as two examples of how they prepare differently. So Bolt, obviously, as we all know and love him, he's quite a crowd entertainer. He feeds off the energy and he uses that. He interacts with the crowd, he interacts with his competitors, he chats. He's got a very relaxed and a very joking, fun way of dealing with the pressure and dealing with the stress. Whereas if we compare it to Wade, he's much more focused. There's barely a smile. You can see that he's just in a world of his own. He's in his own bubble. There's very limited interaction with the media. It looks like this guy means business and he's there to perform optimally. So that's just to give you an example of how athletes differ and differ in the way that they express the stress that they are experiencing. And obviously, as a coach, it's important that you are familiar with that, so that you know with Bolt, if you coach a Bolt, that if he likes entertaining and interacting, that you give him space to do that. And if it's more someone who prefers a Wade van Niekerk type of approach, that you leave him and give him space if that's what he needs. And if he comes and speaks to you, give him input, and then you send him on his way to go on with his race. So how do you then mentally prepare? Here's just a couple of ideas. So again, the aim here is to develop mental toughness. So deciding on a routine. Are you going to do it daily? Are you going to do it every second day? How many times a week do you do it? It's not ideally, it would be great if every athlete can do it daily, but for some it's just not realistic. But at least every second day, it is important to spend time thinking about how you will mentally prepare. For some athletes, again, listening to music. Yeah, I've had some interesting choices. Some people listen to classic music. Others prefer R&B. Others prefer hip hop. I've had people listening to hard rock. So it doesn't really matter what type of music it is, as long as it meets the athlete or the player's needs. That's the most important thing. And then if the athlete knows that they are someone that need to interact, they need energy from other people, that you encourage that and make sure that you, even if speak to the parents or speak to the teammates to get them to chat a bit more, and that you can also monitor and see, how is this athlete doing? Is he engaging? Or, oh, this is usually a guy who's very talkative. Now he's withdrawn. What's going on? So that you can intervene before the game or the race gets underway. And again, if it's someone who prefers the opposite, to actually withdraw from conversations, to give him or her the space to do that. Then focusing on values for the athlete. The easiest way that I use is to ask them to write a retirement speech when they retire from the sport, or how they would like their coach to remember them. And then a lot of values come up, and then they can use those values to guide their behavior. So as a coach, just reminding them of those values and what they can use in that moment. Imagery can also be used very effectively, and this simply involves including all of your senses to recreate the race or the match. So if you are a sprinter and you're thinking of the start, literally visualizing, hearing the crowd, hearing the shot go off, and making sure that you can recreate the race for yourself. That works because the moment that you are in the race, the brain can remember and realize, I've been here before. I can just go with it. I know what to do. My body knows what to do, and I can simply just go with it. Then also very important, setting goals. So for a week or for a training block, what are 3 goals that I'd like to improve on? So if it's a tennis player, improving my cross-court play. If it's a football player, making sure that my dribbling is accurate or my passing is accurate 90% of the time. So also making sure that the goals are measurable so that you and the athlete or the player can see what is going on, or is this working, yes or no? And if it's not working, you can already address that at training and not during a match. Then mindfulness, which is the technique of being present in the here and now without judging thoughts as good or bad, just being here in the present. And usually athletes or players will refer to this as just being in the zone, that everything just feels effortless, that they can just run and just play without feeling tired, and they just it's just really functioning at a very high level, but with mindfulness and practice that can be recreated and their performance can become more consistent. And another thing is also creating a backup plan if things don't go according to plan during the race or during a match, so that if there's a flexibility that the athlete or the player has, that they can adjust and adapt, because that is what mental toughness is about. That if something isn't working, being able to say, you know what, this isn't working. The same, they've figured out our defense or leaking goals at the moment. This is what needs to change, and being able and flexible enough to implement that change. My next slide is a clip. I'm a bit too scared to try it with knowing the technology and the technical issues one can have with it. I will send you the link of this if you wish to look at it. But basically, it just shows the big cats hunting and just the complete focus that they have. That for not one moment do they think, "What if I miss? What if I don't get this?" And of course, animals have it easy. They don't have a critical faculty of which they can think and doubt. So they just see a buck, they decide this is now dinner, and they go for it without second guessing themselves, without worrying about what the outcome will be. And that is what really is needed for optimal performance. It's just a complete and one-sided focus on performing optimally, constantly, and in an effective manner. So of course, if we move on for this presentation, I've used a race, but what happens when you run a race or when you play a match? You have anxiety or a bit of nervousness, and when that happens, your thoughts will start thinking, what if I don't get the start that I want to have, or this athlete always beats me and now I'm up against her, what if she wins me? Then your behavior is influenced by that your stomach will become a bit upset, or you'll start stressing. You might become irritable. You might become to a point where you become teary and crying, and your behavior, the way it will influence your warm-up, it will influence your running. You'll become tense and very stressed, which will again have a detrimental impact on performance. And your emotions will start to run riot with you, that you are extremely worried, you cannot cope, and that those are all you can hear by the way that I'm speaking. It's a feeling of being out of control and overwhelmed, and that cannot lead to optimal performance. It's simply not possible. So if we look at the function of thoughts, thoughts guide our behavior. It's very difficult to control. So if I ask you to not think of a pink elephant, you probably would notice that if you're trying it with me, that you've just seen this big pink elephant in your mind's eye. So if you tell your athlete, don't worry, what's likely to happen? They'll worry and they'll become very stressed. Thoughts are also seen as the end all and be all, that it's a reality that we don't have a choice, but we do have a choice. And that's where the mental toughness comes in, is the ability to make that choice based on your values. And thoughts are just seen as multiple programs open on your computer that you can select. Like for me now, I've got Skype going, I've got PowerPoint going, and they can run simultaneously, and I can choose which one I interact with. And that's how thoughts work. But athletes tend to think, and players tend to think, that it's just one. If I'm worried about my performance, that's all there is to it, and they tend to forget all the build up, all the hard work that they've done. And mental toughness is really just the ability to make decisions on which program is open based on values. So, like I've said with the behavior, this for me is the best illustration of it. It's actually Chad Leclos in the green cap and Michael Phelps here in the black cap in the picture. So here you can see losers focus on winners and winners focus on winning. And that is really what is needed. Had Leclos not looked at Phelps, it's possible he could have won. Yes, we don't know. Or it's just possible that he would have given himself a fighting chance in it. But you can see there, the focus for Phelps is 100% on just finishing strong, where Leclos is being sidetracked. And that slight check shows us that his focus is not on himself and what he needs to do to be successful. It is on his competitor, and that leads to a decrease in performance. And of course, when you start thinking, what if I lose against that guy, the muscle starts tensing up. Technique suffers as a result, and as a result of technique suffering, performance also suffers. So what we think influences our physical and our behavior, and once that happens, and in a negative spiral, performance is the price that you pay. So if we look at emotions, many people will say to me, "Oh, but emotions are the enemy." If you look at it, if emotions, if we just go on how we feel, nothing will be achieved. And yeah, it's not that emotions are the enemy. It's just that if we base our decisions on emotions, we will become frustrated because we won't reach our goals. So emotions, of course, they're a normal part of life. Everyone experiences it. It also allows us to experience life more fully. Like we all know what it feels like to win, and to feel that elation and excitement that comes from a win, or that feeling of accomplishment that comes from mastering a skill that you've been struggling with. And we experience pleasant and unpleasant emotions. Obviously, feeling disappointed that you lost, or that you didn't get your goal time or your PB time, that plays a role. And it's important to not get stuck in emotions, because of course that will make it very difficult to be mentally tough. And emotions shouldn't be eliminated or controlled. It's simply allowing them to come, deal with the disappointment. Yes, I should have done this differently, and then formulating a plan to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Yeah, just some final thoughts on mindfulness. It's just an enhanced awareness of your own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. So basically just doing a bit of a body scan. How am I feeling? I'm feeling a bit disappointed. I didn't have the performance that I wanted. What can I do about it? Well, I can just sit here and sulk about it, or I can talk to my coach and figure out what needs to happen next, what went wrong, what went right, and how we can build on it. The focus is on the here and now. So it's just for this match, because sometimes athletes will say, yeah, but I never get it right, or I will never beat that guy. And of course, if that is the thought, the behavior will be that you will never beat that guy. And it's non-judgmental. It's just allowing these thoughts to come and to go. And usually with our athletes, if they make a mistake on the pitch, if they cannot think to themselves, okay, that happened, it doesn't feel great, but let me focus on the next pass, on the next dribble. If they cannot do that, which is again a function of mental toughness, performance will suffer, and you end up having to substitute the player because they really struggle to bring themselves back and to perform optimally. Mindfulness is not, many people think that it's a state of relaxation where you're a bit of a Zen moment and you're a bit of a hippie. It's not that. Although the side effect of mindfulness is that you feel more relaxed. And we know that when you feel more relaxed, your abilities to retrieve memories from your long-term memory bank is increased, your concentration is increased, and therefore you can perform optimally. But that is just a side, that's almost an added bonus of mindfulness. The main focus of it is being present in the here and now. It's not a blank mind. It's impossible to not have any thoughts. Even I think for women it's much worse because we always have things going on and thinking and talking a lot, but it's definitely not possible to have a blank mind, and it's not positive thinking. It's not trying to alter your reality by saying, yeah, no, it will go better, it will be better. Sometimes that works for performance if you try that, but in the long run, if you play the long game in terms of mental preparation, it will be a hit and a miss here and there. If it was that easy of just thinking positively, we would have much more people competing for the being a world champion or really competing at an elite level. It's hard because it requires mental toughness, and it requires it every single training session, not just here and there or on match day. Now, just giving you an idea of what mindlessness is versus mindfulness. So mindlessness is when your body and your mind is at a different place. So when you're in autopilot, you've probably seen it with some of your players, especially during exam time when they train. So they're there and they're going through the motions, but there's a bit of a lackluster approach. The intensity is limited. There's not too much going on. Where mindfulness is the body and the mind aligns, and what you're busy with is you're immersed in that, and it's almost like everything else is just for that moment. Every other aspect of life is just put on pause, and you can just focus optimally on what needs to happen. The reasons for mindlessness and that makes it hard for people to be mentally tough is that we live on autopilot. We rush from A to B and just get on to the next thing. And you'll often see it with when kids need to learn a new technique. They're already 5 steps ahead, but they're struggling to just master the basics. And we perform things without thinking about it. It's become a bit dull or so used to it that we don't really realize what goes into it and how much effort needs to be put into it. And they're busy, but their thoughts are with the friends going out this evening or what will happen during the holidays. And of course, with COVID, it's been a big thing. What happens if this tournament is not taking place? Earn an income from that. What if that doesn't happen? When will we start playing again? And especially for the athletes that base their training on winning or on a tournament, they've really suffered during COVID because now it almost feels like there's nothing externally working towards. There's no external reward, and they've had to work really hard to self-motivate themselves or just, okay, for this week, these are my training goals. For next week, these are my training goals. So it has been quite tough from a COVID perspective. Then the task-focused attention ties into the mindfulness and the mental toughness that when you're task-focused, you're busy with the here and now on what can you do now to lead to performance. So, for example, here I've used races again, so making sure that you pump hard with your arms, that you lift your knees, that will give you the strength to overtake your competitor, and not thinking about what if she beats me, she's slightly ahead of me, she's going to win, because that means that you are in self-focused attention. So your own thoughts and emotions are consuming you to the point where it's distracting you from performing optimally. And then you would think, I cannot focus on the task at hand. And if you cannot focus on the task at hand, your performance will suffer and you'll have impaired performance. I'm not going to try and do the activity with you on a virtual platform, and it doesn't work well, but I will send on links that you can look at YouTube. There are quite a few that you can try and that are sport specific that really work very well, and that will do the experience of mindfulness justice. Yeah, that's it from my side. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you so very much, Ms. Van Gaal. I think that was very informative and quite a mouthful, and I think quite rightly so, because the psychology and mental strength of a athlete is very important together with coaches. Now, in terms of questions, I've got a couple of here. Now, the first one is from Tyrone Roskins yet again. He asks, if a swimmer is not psychologically together in training or competition, how do I tell that if the swimmer must sit out, or do you think that the swimmer must continue? Is it not going to be harmful to the player, him or herself? And lastly as well, how do we help as a coach without doing more harm to the player or the swimmer in this regard?
Well, thank you for that question, Tyrone. It's quite a mouthful, and there's no straightforward or easy answer. In sport, unfortunately, we only have one or two shots at really competing optimally, and it can be hard. So obviously, if the player or the swimmer does not participate, it has consequences, and it can create more anxiety for them. And if they do compete, there's a risk that there will be harm. And there, it's important to have a discussion with the swimmer or the player to determine what they feel they can manage at that moment. But then as a coach, really just taking off some pressure by focusing on process goals. So focusing on technique, saying that we're not going on your time, we're really just focusing on you getting some race experience. And that means that you focus on your start, you focus on your turn, or you focus on any technique in the sport to make that their focus, and not the time that they swim or the outcome, because focusing on the outcome for many of the athletes create a lot of anxiety, and by just bringing it back to them and their technique, or getting some experience from it, that will be more optimal.
Yeah. Now, secondly, Ms. Van Gaal, now the second question comes from Derek Potter. Now, he's asking, with ladies or slash girls going through their menstrual period before a competition, what do you say to them as a coach? Do you get them through training, or do you give them some time off?
Sure, that's a difficult question, but again, I think there's no shotgun or one size fits all approach. It's really knowing your athlete and having a discussion with them, and finding out what they feel they can manage in that moment. If you base performance on values and you've had that discussion with your athlete that being mentally tough is sometimes when you're not feeling well to be able to push through, and they've bought into it, then you can use the values directed approach to get them to perform optimally. But if that is not in place, then of course you cannot expect them to perform. Then again, I would try and take the pressure off by saying, well, let's see what you can do. I know you're not feeling like yourself. Let's see what you can get out of this out of this game or out of this event. And if you're not feeling well, you can show me and you can withdraw. The risk of that is that some athletes will start using that as an excuse to not perform and not finish a game or not finish a race. And that can become, if that happens every month or every meet, that can become a habit, which is not going to lead to increased performance.
Yeah, and another one now, this one says, for athletes who have lost their income, how do you keep those motivated? And particularly now that we are in COVID-19, so a certain athlete has lost his or her income, how do you keep that individual motivated?
Mm-hmm. Well, what can work is to speak to the athlete and to try and figure out what motivated them and what made them pursue the sport. Did they purely pursue the sport for the financial gain? And very rarely that will be the case for the athletes. So just reminding them when they started out as a swimmer, or when they started out as a football player or a tennis player, what motivated them, what drew them to the sport there, and just reigniting that passion that they have for the sport, and reassessing and reevaluating their goals. That if we just do sport to win, then we will end up not really enjoying it as much. And if we just do sport for the financial gain, of course, we will enjoy it, but it will not be fulfilling. So just reevaluating those goals and why do I do that sport, and really doing a bit of soul searching about what does sport mean to me and why why is it important for me to do that? And then working with the coach, working with the federation to see if there's no way that the financial burden can be eased a bit.
Yeah, and
So
the
help
last
it
one.
problem solve.
Oh, sorry, you can continue. Sorry to cut you in. Sorry.
No, that just assisting them to problem solve from a financial aspect to just relieve that financial burden that they're facing.
Okay, thank you. This is a very interesting one coming out from Benny now. I think, I myself have been through this situation now. A certain player in the team, very talented, one of the best, gifted, one could say, he's got a touch of an angel, a magician with a ball at feet and a gentleman without it. Very talented, but the problem is, disrespect. He's got a very big head and also disrespecting his or her teammates. How do you deal with that? Because when the player is on the pitch, you do need them because the player is talented, but he's got that swag, he's got that I'm a superstar type of mentality. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a quite an interesting question, and it's hard having someone that does not necessarily respect the coach or the players or the environment that the coach is trying to create. And there, I would focus on the player individually and share with him or her what the vision is for this team and get them to buy into the value-directed approach that the coach is trying, that it's an environment that is based on respect, that's based on understanding, and that there will be consequences for behavior if that is not the case. And once the whole team is bought into that, then the team will sort of, the group dynamic will sort the person out and keep him or her in check in terms of the arrogance. So usually working with the coach and working with the athlete to just redirect that energy, which can come across as being arrogant, into a more effective way. Sometimes, especially with teenagers, they don't realize the impact of their arrogance on the team or on the coach, and that they're really creating a very toxic environment. So getting them on board and even giving them tasks to run the warm-up, to get the drills going, that sometimes helps to get them to buy in and to respect you and respecting the team.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Ms. Van Grala. I think that was the last question in terms of, your presentation from the depth of our hearts, from all of us here at the Gauteng Department of Sports. Thank you so very much for your time and your presentation. Truly do appreciate it. And I'm guessing that this is definitely the first of many. I
hope so. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this opportunity and for the wonderful initiatives that the department is running for coaches. I appreciate it, and I look forward to engaging in person the next time. Thank you so very much. That was Ms. Van Grala. I think that was very informative. I mean, mental toughness in sports is very, very important. Now, the last one, the last one is really interesting to say the least. It is Mr. Khalid Gallant. He is the SAID's CEO. Now, he's going to be presenting dealing with COVID-19 from SAID's perspective. Now, Mr. Gallant is the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Exercise Science from Occidental College out in Los Angeles in California, to be precise. He also has an MS in Sports Medicine from the United States of Sports Academy in Alabama, and finally he's got a Master's of Business Administration degree in International Business and Management from the Western Washington University, that is also out in Washington. What a man, what a gentleman, and the qualifications that this gentleman has got, I think we are going to be learning more from it. And there's a certain question that I also like to ask, just towards the end after the presentation. Please do stay tuned. We are on all our social media platforms. It is YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, as well as Facebook. So we are going to be, asking questions from those, platforms. So Mr. Gallant, I'm not sure if he is with us. Yes, very good afternoon to you, and how are you?
Good afternoon. Good to be with you. And I have to commend the Gauteng Sports Department for putting up this coaches session on a Saturday afternoon, and for those that have stuck around and have the patience to attend and participate in the seminar so far.
No, thank you so very much, Mr. Gallant. I think you possibly get an awful lot of questions because of the positions that you do occupy. But yeah, thank you so very much. I think you can with all due respect, start with your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. And I think you should be able to see the screen. Oops. Sorry again. I'm like many of you. I'm fairly new to this. Um, I can see my screen, but now I can't see. But if you can't see or you can't follow me, I'm not going to depend on the slides since we have had problems this morning with it. And I can continue with the presentation irrespective of whether you can see the slides. So at the moment, I can see my slides. Okay, there we go.
Just to
So
confirm. Sorry, yeah.
I've been asked to speak. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just got confirmation that we can see the slides, so you can absolutely continue with your presentation.
Okay, cool. There we go. So I've been asked to speak on the drug testing program in South Africa in a post-pandemic environment. Can you just give me a sec? Excuse me. Just give me a sec. I just have someone at the door. Just hang on a sec. Luck would have it, as luck would have it, when one starts your presentation, you have an interruption at the door, and those are some of the challenges of remote learning and working from home. But I'm ready to resume again. So I've been asked to speak about sport and testing in a post-pandemic environment. And during the lockdown, there were quite a few questions from the public and the media in terms of hello? Hello?
Yes, we are hearing you. I think it's just trying to give all the attention to you. But yeah, we are hearing you perfectly fine.
Okay, sorry. So the question that have been posed by many is the lockdown and the lockdown emanating from the COVID-19 pandemic a window and opportunity for doping in sport? And with SAID openly declaring that we have ceased operations since March, meaning that there's no testing taking place in sport, is this an opportunity for dopers to proliferate during this period? And will sport be different in a post-lockdown environment if cheaters are
Mr.
allowed
Gallant?
to continue unabated without any regulation during during this lockdown? So I'm going to be addressing some of those topics and also giving you a context to where we are in South Africa. The Institute for Drug-Free Sport shut down operations a week
Mr.
before
Gallant?
the official lockdown. Yes, go ahead.
I'm being told that can you please put your slide in slide mode, slideshow. I understand. Sorry about the slide mode.
Okay, it's in slide mode.
Perfect. Thank you. You can continue. Thank you very much.
Thanks, and again, apologies. I'm new to all these presentations via Zoom, but I must commend everyone for their patience and also for the Gauteng Academy for your assistance with the technology. So, as mentioned, sport is not an essential sport, so we had to comply with the lockdown. There was no need for sport to continue during the lockdown, and what that also entailed is that testing and anti-doping education also shut down. And say it shut down a week before the lockdown. At that point, the knowledge level, and I will admit that myself and my staff, what we knew on a pandemic lockdown was very small. And we had anticipated that we would be shut down or closing operations for about 3 weeks, and we'd reopen by mid-April. Bearing in mind that SAIS has been ramping up and preparing our athletes and Team South Africa athletes and those that are qualifying for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, which is now postponed to 2021. So we shut down sport in terms of testing as sport was being shut down. And our shutdown was primarily to protect the athletes and also our testing personnel. Obviously, with testing, we interact with the athlete, we go to their homes, we see them after event. And in terms of the way that the testing take place, there was a high risk of further spreading the environment by the virus by continuing to test. So during these couple of weeks where we temporary shutdown operations, we got an announcement that they were looking at postponing the Tokyo Olympics. In South Africa, the Cape Epic cycle race, which is the highest ranked international cycle race that South Africa hosts, and we say it has an integral role in the drug testing, was cancelled. Super Rugby was cancelled, and then one of our premier road races, the Comrades Marathon, was also cancelled. So what that means is we then have to adjust our testing program, which is primarily the out of competition testing program, because these events are cancelled. So again, we have to assess what do we do during this period. During the lockdown, we used the opportunity to really look at how we are going to operate in a post-COVID sports environment. We are very optimistic that we didn't see the lockdown as the end, though we didn't anticipate it was going to be that long or continuing to be that long at the different levels. We knew that there would be light at the end of the tunnel, and we wanted to be ready when the lockdown was lifted. Obviously, as I mentioned, our knowledge base on lockdown and the pandemic was very limited, and we did not quite know and anticipate level 5s, level 4s, and the different levels. So we had to prepare and start thinking where we would find ourselves as a regulatory agency in a post-COVID sports environment. And I'll come later to that, how we've adjusted and how we've made it safer for our testing personnel to go out there and conduct their work, and also for athletes to be assured that when they get tested, that they're not at the greater risk for being exposed to the COVID-19 virus. Coming back to the point, is lockdown an opportunity for dopers to cheat? Off the bat, we always have to bear in mind that irrespective of lockdown or normal sports environment, there will always be athletes who are willing to roll the dice and take the risks of cheating. Unfortunately, in South Africa, we have consistently in the last 5 to 10 years been, in terms of the number of tests that we do, in the top 10 globally of athletes that cheat. So we in the company, in the terms of the top 10 of countries like Russia, India, Brazil, China, some of the Eastern Bloc countries, and more recently with all the weightlifters being tested positive, also in the company of countries like Egypt that has also been seeing a large number of dopers. But then coming back to, again, the lockdown is an opportunity cheat. It would be very difficult for the top elite athletes to cheat during lockdown. And here we're referring to the athletes that are qualifying for the Olympics, the Super Rugby players, those competing at the Cape Epic, the Wade van Niekerks, the Chad Leclos. We have a testing profile on these athletes, which is called the Athlete Biological Passport. And although we're not testing during lockdown, we will be able to, when we test them, we will be able to see if there are severe fluctuations in their profile. And those that understand the science of the athlete biological profile and also with the laws and regulations of anti-doping are aware that we are able to prosecute you if there are fluctuations in your athlete biological profile that you cannot reasonably be explained. And in South Africa to date, since the inception of the program, we have successfully prosecuted at least 4 athletes. And of those 4 athletes, 3 have been cyclists and 1 has been a distance runner. Now, should you should you decide to dope during lockdown and you think that SAIS won't catch you, one has to bear in mind that once you start in a doping regime, it's extremely difficult to stop. One goes through, you have to cycle through your steroids, it stays in your system for a long period. Some drugs, performance enhancing drugs, exit your system very quick. But the methods that we use for testing is very sensitive in terms of the half-life of some of these substances. And if you may recall, in some of the recent cases where athletes have tested positive, the Chili Boy case, where they have said, well, if it is this substance that I took it so many weeks and months ago, why would it still be in our system? And again, what they're forgetting is the sensitivity of the analysis and of the laboratory protocols that we use. And then the question is, what should athletes then do during lockdown and during these restrictions to prevent them from cheating? If you are a professional athlete, generally speaking, and the overwhelming majority of athletes in South Africa do not cheat and are clean athletes. Your focus should be on further enhancing your sports skills, and as the speaker before me eloquently illustrated, the importance of mental preparation, mental fortitude, and those mental preparation skills in terms of competition, and especially at the elite level. Now, moving on to planning for this post-COVID sports environment, as I mentioned, during lockdown, we used the opportunity to try and predict and to see how we would be able to function in a post-COVID environment. We've adapted our international testing standard to comply with the pandemic safety measures, and by that we mean the use of PPE equipment. Our sample collection officers now will be fully kitted out with PPE. They will have temperature monitors. They will have a questionnaire that they will show the athlete in the last 48 hours that they did not have any symptoms. And then what that does, it gives the person that is being tested some assurity that these sample collection officers are not also a potential risk in terms of carrying the virus. And it also prevents an athlete from escaping being tested, to say, oh no, I don't want to be tested, go away, because you pose a COVID risk to me. And if an athlete is self-isolating or is positive or is scared that the sample collection officer is positive or is not convinced, there's a set procedure and rights that we've developed that the athlete is afforded and the sample collection officer. And if you turn away a sample collection officer, you better have your case in order, because that automatically will be a doping offense if you don't have a very reasonable and watertight case for turning away a sample collection officer from testing you. Obviously, we modified our test distribution plan with one of the milestones being the postponed Tokyo 2021 Olympics. We will continue to test high-risk athletes, but the testing will be more robust, and we'll increase the numbers, because we have quite a few events happening in a short period, what we refer to as a congested sports calendar, qualifying events for the Tokyo Olympics. What are the doping risks in South African sport? Unfortunately, school rugby continues to be a high-risk activity for doping. During lockdown, we were still processing cases that we tested athletes just before lockdown during January and February. And again, those continue. We continue to catch high school rugby players for doping offences, particularly the use of steroids. So one of the main challenges for SAGE in a post-COVID sports environment is addressing doping in South Africa through education. We have a challenge because we've identified what we've referred to as compliance fatigue of the South African population due to petty lockdown regulations. And bearing in mind that sport in our country mirrors our society. So if people are tired of wearing masks or not gathering in groups of smaller than 50, that has spillover effects in sport. And people will tend then to have less respect for the laws and regulations that apply in sport and on the field. There's also a perception that the laws and regulations are applied differently to different people, implying that not all are equal before the law. If that is the case and the sentiment in South Africa, again, that has a negative spillover into sport. What we are looking at is innovating methods of conveying anti-doping education to our specific target audiences. This seminar today is one of these innovative methods, though we've had challenges this morning. But this is what we refer to as the new normal, that we will be interacting and teaching virtually and sharing information virtually for quite a while, and we will develop better ways of doing it and be more sophisticated, that it's easier with less technical interruptions. Leveraging other mediums of communication. Currently, I heard the moderator refer, you can post questions via Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, so we can interact with different audiences, and also whichever whatever access you have won't limit you in terms of accessing the information or sharing information with us. Obviously, the constraining factor being data and internet connection. Our focus in anti-doping education will always be around values, and we will continue to emphasize that. So when we do education initiatives in anti-doping education, it is not solely focused on what happens when we catch you, the dangers of a steroid. You're going to get, if a man, you're going to get breast, your testicles are going to shrink, but it's also about the values of sport and how doping fits into the values of sport, and doping is equivalent to cheating. And why do we play sport? Why do people participate in sport? Is what we refer to as sportsmanship and for camaraderie. So we will continue to integrate anti-doping with values-based education, or the good values of sport. So lastly, the big challenge is clean sports still attainable in a post-COVID sports world? Doping control testing will be, as I mentioned, will be even more robust. And with such a short time leading up to major world championships, whether it's swimming, the Olympics, track and field, we have to provide assurance to athletes that when they travel representing South Africa, that the athletes accompanying them are clean, and also the athletes that are competing against are clean. So we also put pressure on our counterparts in other countries to have robust testing programs. There will be more out of competition opportunities where sports events are held. Ironically, the sports, the biologically safe bubble environment actually makes it easier for us to do the out of competition testing, because we know where all the athletes are and they're limited to a certain precinct, and specifically to the hotel or to the competition environment. During lockdown, we've participated in quite a few scientific webinars on the dried blood spot innovation. And that's another form of testing. Currently, we draw blood for testing, and the innovations have been just a finger prick on what we've referred to as a dried blood spot. We will be able to analyze that for even greater substances, more performance enhancing substances with a higher sensitivity level. And it's more reliable with when we draw blood. We only have about 48 hours for that blood sample to get to the lab before it is compromised with a dried blood spot. The transportation is much more stable to the laboratory. And globally, we're hoping to roll this out by 2021. And currently, it is going through its certification process. The way I see the trend now, that dried blood spot testing will happen in Japan during the 2021 Olympics. During the lockdown period, as an agency, we were quite busy with our compliance, in complying with the World Anti-Doping Code that comes into effect on the 1st of January 2021, and modifying and adapting the South African rules that it is in compliance with the World Anti-Doping Code. This code and rules talks more about investigations and compliance, and gives greater authority and jurisdictions to agencies like SAIDS to conduct investigations and also to prosecute athletes or federations out of those investigations. So with that, again, thank you for the Gauteng Academy of Sport, and for those that have had the patience to sit through the session and listen to the SAIDS perspective. And again, apologies for the technical hiccups during my presentation and earlier too. Thank you. Hello? Hello?
Hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you so very much for your presentation. I think we are now going to take a couple of questions from our social media platforms. I think let's just start with the first one. It's quite a long one, but we will try to be a bit slow in terms of reading it. It says now, with regards to the Caster Semenya situation, numerous doping tests were done and returned negative, yet she was still asked to take medication to reduce her testosterone level to be able to compete. Are there any WADA guidelines that should protect an athlete from that kind of situation?
The Caster Semenya case is not and has never been a doping issue. So SAIDS and WADA has no opinion on that. The issue of Semenya's testosterone levels has been a rule created by the World Athletics, or previously known as the IAAF. And we have never been involved in testing of Caster's hormonal levels, nor has WADA or SAIDS pronounced on what those should be. So that is a national federation issue, World Athletics. And the best people to ask and to comment on those would be those experts or from World Athletics that have made these rules that precludes or limits Caster Semenya from participating in track and field events.
And secondly, Mr. Garland, is there any way of getting tested without a tester coming to my house?
Interestingly, during the lockdown, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency launched a virtual testing where a sample collection kit was couriered to the athlete, and then the athlete had to log on to Zoom, and then, within certain privacy laws, the athlete passed the sample. But again, currently South Africa won't be implementing a virtual testing procedure. So the basic answer to your question, no, there is no current method of being tested without someone coming to your home or testing you after the sports events.
And,
So there
and
has
I'm-
to be a physical interaction, in other words.
Correct. Lastly, from my end, I just wanted to ask, in regards to the one that happened a couple of years ago of Tandani Jumaile, one who's still contracted with Orlando Pirates Football Club. Remember, the test on him was done randomly. Is there any, contract that the clubs sign with your federation that we can choose any sort of player on any day for him to test? Is there any kind of contract between, your federation and sports clubs?
We don't sign any contracts with any sports clubs or federations. In this case, if we're talking about Orlando Pirates, it would fall under the PSL and SAFA. The way the SAGE is structured, and not only SAGE, all anti-doping agencies around the world, we are independent of sports structures such as SASCOC, as in SAFA. And the way the anti-doping rules, whether it's the South African anti-doping rules or the World Anti-Doping Code is crafted, is that we reserve the right to test any athlete who is licensed or eligible to compete, whether it's a swimmer or a football player. So there's no agreement between SAGE or any sporting body on who should be tested or how we conduct our testing.
Yeah, there's just the last one that also just came in. Sorry about that. Is it a must that an event have its own doctor on site to deal with complicated injuries that medical carers can deal with them there and there? I've seen some players referred out and as a result compromising COVID-19 regulations. So is it important that each and every sports event has its own on-site doctor?
That's more of a medical sports event question. And that the answer to that I won't be able to answer as someone from anti-doping, but I do know the answer where one can get more information on that is with the Sports and Recreation Act that stipulates the number of safety personnel, irrespective of COVID or non-COVID, that should be present at a sports event. And then there also is various sports medicine protocols and procedure. Those are recommended. Those are not necessarily the law. But the Sports and Recreation Safety Act does outline those type of measures.
Precisely. Another one in regards to what we're speaking about is the one that asks during the games or training, how dangerous or helpful is it to take drugs or medication? Example, taking tablets or headaches, because some of challenges these are some of the challenges we experience during trekking. So something of that sort. So how important is it that during games or training that one takes pills or medication to help them possibly with headaches or something of that sort?
Well, one always has to go to root causes, and just to your previous question on the availability of medical professionals, that's the value of having medical doctors closely associated or assigned to teams, so that the correct medication are given, so that athletes are not given or allowed to take medications or substances that are banned for something as simple as a headache. But again, having competent medical professionals associated with the team, they won't necessarily only treat their headache. They go, what is causing this headache? And rather address the underlying cause. We all get headaches from time to time. Sometimes it's nerve stress, but other times it's a symptom of a serious underlying condition or injury.
Mr. Gallant, I think that is that from our side. Thank you so very much for your time. Truly appreciate it. You've spoken about Zoom just before we started. I think, I'll give you 10 out of 10 in terms of that. You are getting the hang of it. Thank you so very much for your time. We truly appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thanks for inviting me, and also thanks to the participants for asking the questions and for listening in. And good luck with your further initiatives.
Thank you so very much. That was our last speaker, Mr. Kelland, the president or CEO, if you like, of SAIT. That was at the last speaker for today. I just wanted to say thank you so very much to all the speakers here today. It was quite informative, to say the least. We've learned quite a lot, and thank you so very much, the Gauteng Department of Sports. I think these are such initiatives that we should be having in the next couple of months, because as COVID-19 looks like it's here to stay with us, let's try to have more of these, for all our coaches as well as athletes, to try and learn from these seminars or online virtual conducts such as these. So thank you so very much for tuning in and watching, and thank you so much to all our viewers as well for the question. We truly do appreciate it, and as I said, I hope and pray that this is the first of many. We're back again in the next couple of months.
Introducing our MEC for Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, Mbali Hlophe, who will give us an address for our 2020 Women's Day celebration. Over to you, MEC.
I'm Mbali Hlophe, the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. Today is Women's Day, and it's a day worth celebrating, because we know just the strides that women throughout the years have taken for us to be able to enjoy some of the freedoms we have today. There's indeed a lot that still has to be done, because if you do look at women and the status that they're in, we're still largely excluded, whether it's within the economy and so forth. But the government of today is ensured that we make sure that as many women are included in a number of opportunities that are there. That is why there's various set-asides that are there within departments to make sure that there's inclusion of women, people with disabilities, youth, and the various other individuals that need to be incorporated. But with that said, today we celebrate under obviously the COVID pandemic, which means that we're not going to have a usual event as we usually do. We've now had to go virtually with our events, but we'll still keep you as entertained as we would have had it been just a normal event. So please stay tuned and make sure that you join us in our virtual programming. It's fun-filled, content-filled, and we hope that you'll be entertained accordingly. So, ngiyabonga. Let's enjoy this Women's Day.